She grabbed the microphone the second the dean said my name. Not after. During. My own name, half finished in the air, and my sister wrapped her hand around that mic stand like it had been waiting for her all along. The whole row stood up. They cheered. For her. I was the one in the gown. I was the one who'd just been called to that stage. And my sister Delphine leaned into the microphone, lifted her left hand into the camera light, and announced she was getting engaged. The applause swallowed everything. It swallowed me. I didn't reach for the mic. I didn't argue. I stood at the edge of the stage in my cap, my tassel still on the wrong side, and I smiled. Because I'd seen the ring. I'd seen the ring, and I knew exactly which one it was, and I knew where it had come from. And I knew that on Monday morning, a copy of that clip was going to land in a place my sister never imagined it reaching. So I let her have the stage. I let the whole row cheer. I smiled, and I waited for Monday. I'm Marigold Whitlock, 31, and the woman everyone in that auditorium pitied that afternoon was the only one in the building who understood what had just happened. The cameras were still rolling. My sister was still waving that hand. And the timer she'd just started. She had no idea it was even running. Let me take you back to that morning before she ever touched the mic. The morning started the way every important morning in our family started, with Delphine running late and everyone waiting. I'd been ready since 7. Cap pressed, gown steamed the night before. The little gold cord for honors looped over my shoulder. I'd worked 4 years for that cord while holding a full-time job, and I'd ironed it twice because my hands needed something to do. My mother, Coralie, came down the stairs at 8 and looked at me like I'd shown up to the wrong event. "You're wearing that?" "It's a graduation gown, Mom." "I mean your hair." She set her coffee down. "Delphine's doing something with hers. Maybe she can squeeze you in." Delphine was upstairs. We could hear her, the hairdryer, the music, the sound of a person who has never once arrived on time for anyone. I told my mother I was fine. She gave me the look she always gave me. The one that said fine was a disappointment, a settling, a thing only people without ambition chose. Then she went back to the stairs and called up to Delphine in a voice 3 degrees warmer than any she'd ever used on me. "Take your time, sweetheart. They can't start without the graduate." Except I was the graduate. Delphine had dropped out of 2 programs by then. But in our house, the spotlight didn't follow the achievement. It followed her. I want to be honest about something because it matters later. I didn't hate my sister. I'd spent 31 years not hating her, which is its own kind of exhausting. I'd covered for her, lent to her, smiled in photos where she stood in front of me. I'd learned to be the steady one, the background one, the one you don't have to worry about. And I'd told myself that was a virtue. That morning, I still believed it was. We were supposed to leave at 8:30. We left at 9:40. Delphine came down in a dress that cost more than my month of rent, sunglasses pushed into her hair, and she looked at me in my cap and gown and said the things she always said. "Aw, look at you. So official." So official. Like I was a child in a costume. My father carried her bag to the car. Nobody carried mine. And as I locked the front door behind us, my phone buzzed in my pocket, a message from work, from the store, the kind of message that would mean nothing to anyone else in that car and everything to me by Monday. I didn't read it yet. I just felt it there, warm against my leg, the first small piece of a day that was about to come apart. I worked at a jewelry store. I should tell you that now because it's the hinge the whole day turns on. Not a mall kiosk, a real one. Brennan and Hale, the kind of place with a buzzer on the door and a safe in the back and clients who'd been coming for 40 years. I'd started there at 23, sweeping the floor and watching the gemologist work, and over 8 years I'd become the assistant manager and a certified gemologist myself. I could tell you the cut of a stone across a room. I could tell you whether a setting was original or replaced. I could tell you, from 10 feet away under bad auditorium lighting, the exact piece my sister was holding up to the camera. But that came later. In the car, all I knew was that we were late, and that my mother spent the whole drive coaching Delphine on her announcement. I caught pieces of it from the back seat. Announcement. "Camera. Make sure Aunt Bev can see." "What announcement?" I asked. "Don't worry about it," my mother said, not turning around. "Today's about you." I almost laughed. "Today's about you" was a sentence my family used the way other families used grace before dinner. Automatic, meaningless. A thing you say so you don't have to mean it. Delphine turned around in her seat and grinned at me, and that grin had a secret in it. I knew that grin. I'd grown up across the hall from that grin. It was the grin she wore right before she took something that wasn't hers and got everyone to thank her for it. "You're gonna love this," she said. I did not love it, but I didn't know that yet. So I looked out the window and I let the warm weight of my phone sit in my pocket, unread, and I told myself that whatever it was, it would be over by the afternoon. I had no idea how wrong I was, or how right. We got to the auditorium with 11 minutes to spare, which in my family counts as early. I lined up with my Rao, gold cord on my shoulder, while my family found their seats. I could see them from the floor. My mother had saved an entire stretch of bench for the aunts, the cousins, a family friend with a phone already up recording. They'd come in force. For a second, I let myself think it was for me. Then I saw the way they were all turned toward Delphine, not toward the stage, toward her. The ceremony started. The speeches went long, the way they always do. I sat with my hands folded and watched the program creep toward the W's, and I felt that old flutter I'm not proud of, the hope that this time, for these 90 seconds, the room would be mine. The dean reached my row. He read the names, Vance, Walsh, Webb, and then he looked at his card and he said it. Marigold Wit! That was as far as he got, because Delphine was already moving. She'd come down from the seats, down the side aisle in that dress, in those heels, and she reached the floor microphone the staff used for announcements and she pulled it toward her mouth like she'd rehearsed it, which, I'd learn later, she had. Sorry, I just have to," she said, laughing into the mic, and the sound of her voice filled the room where my name should have been. "I cannot hold this in for one more second." She lifted her left hand. "I'm getting married!" And the Rao stood up. My family, the aunts, the cousins, my mother on her feet with both hands pressed to her chest. They stood and they cheered, and the friend with the phone swung it toward Delphine, and somewhere behind me, a few hundred strangers, not knowing what else to do, clapped along. I was standing at the bottom of the stage steps, 1 foot up. My name was still hanging in the air, cut in half, Wit, and nobody was looking at me anymore. The dean glanced at me, then at her, unsure. The applause kept rolling, and I made a choice in that half second that I've thought about every day since. I stepped back down. I let my foot come off the stair, and I smiled, and I clapped too, because what else does the background do? And I let my sister have the moment that had my name written on it. That's the part everyone remembers, the part where I gave in. But while she stood there with her hand in the air, milking the cheers, the camera light caught the ring on her finger and threw it straight at me, and I stopped clapping. I want you to remember the woman who clapped for her own theft, because in about 48 hours she stops clapping for good, and the people cheering in that row are the ones who end up sitting very, very quietly. But right then, in the noise, all I did was look at that ring and go cold. I knew that ring. Before I tell you how, let me back up, because to understand the cold that went through me, you have to understand my sister and the 11 months that led to that microphone. I'll keep it quick. It's the kind of story that explains itself. Delphine is 2 years older than me. Growing up, she was the bright one. Bright the way a flare is bright, all at once and impossible to ignore and gone fast. She got the dance recitals, the modeling photos, the birthday parties with rented ponies. I got the hand-me-downs and the line, Marigold's our easy one. Easy, as in, requires nothing, as in, notice her less. I learned to make that true. By 12, I'd stopped asking for things. By 16, I had a job. By 20, I was paying for my own everything while my parents floated Delphine's rent, Delphine's car, Delphine's between-things stretches that lasted years. I told myself I didn't mind. Steady people don't mind. That was the story. What I minded was the borrowing, because somewhere in the last few years, Delphine had started to sink. Not in a way the family admitted out loud. But I saw it, the calls asking for a quick 300, the car that got repossessed and then somehow reappeared, the story about a friend's boutique that never opened. She owed people. I didn't know how much. I knew it was more than the family could keep papering over, and I knew my mother kept papering anyway, because the one thing worse than Delphine being in trouble was anyone outside the family finding out. That was the engine of our house. Protect the image. Delphine is the image. Everyone else holds the wall up. 3 weeks before my graduation, Delphine called me. Not for money, for once. To gush. I met someone, she said. Marigold, you should see the ring. I should see the ring. I held the phone and I thought, here we go, another flare. I asked his name. She got vague. I asked how long. She got vaguer. She wanted to talk about the ring. How big, how old, how everyone was going to die when they saw it. I told her I was happy for her. I half meant it. Then I went back to studying for finals and I forgot about the call because I had a life that didn't revolve around her ring. I should not have forgotten. But that's the thing about being the easy one. You train yourself not to look too hard at your sister. You've been looking away your whole life. It's a reflex by then. So when she said ring, I pictured something her new mystery man had bought and I let it go. The next time I saw that ring, it was on her hand, in a camera light, in the silence where my name used to be. And this time, I looked hard. This time, it was my job to look, and what I saw turned the whole afternoon to ice. Here's what I saw. It was an old European-cut diamond, easily over 2 carats, in a hand-pierced platinum setting with a specific kind of millgrain edge. The tiny beaded border they did by hand 100 years ago and almost nobody does now. The shoulders had a filigree pattern I'd described to you as a running vine if you weren't a jeweler, and a half-moon notch in the gallery where the original maker's mark would sit. I knew that piece, not a piece like it, that piece, because 9 days earlier it had crossed my counter. Let me be precise, because the precision is the whole point. Brennan and Hale takes estate pieces on consignment. About 2 weeks before my graduation, an older gentleman had brought in a small collection from his late wife. 3 rings, a brooch, a pair of earrings, and we'd photographed and documented everyone for the consignment file. I'd done the intake myself. I'd held that European-cut diamond under the loupe and noted the millgrain, the filigree, the notch. I'd written its file number on the tag in my own handwriting. And 4 days before graduation, that ring had been reported missing from our consignment case. I need you to hear that clearly, because it's where everyone always jumps to the wrong conclusion. I did not steal anything. I did not plant anything. I did not secretly record anything or hide a notebook of proof. I simply did my job 9 days before my sister walked down an aisle she wasn't supposed to be on. And my job had put that exact ring with that exact notch under my own loupe. When it went missing, the store did what any store does. We reviewed it internally, we notified the consignor, we filed a loss report with the police and with our insurer, and we circulated the photographs to the trade and to local resale channels, the way the industry does, so that if the piece surfaced anywhere, a pawn counter, an auction, a buyer's appraisal, someone would recognize it and flag it. I'd helped circulate those photographs. The photo of that ring, file number and all, was sitting in an email I'd sent 4 days before I put on my cap and gown. So when my sister lifted her hand in that auditorium and the light hit the millgrain and the filigree and, yes, the little half-moon notch in the gallery, I didn't have to wonder. I'm a gemologist. I'd documented it. I'd reported it. I'd emailed its picture to half the resale market in the state. And now it was on a live stream on my sister's finger, being waved at a camera in front of 300 witnesses. That's the cold that went through me. Not anger. Not even surprise, fully. Just the slow, dropping understanding of what she'd actually done, and what was now, mechanically, unavoidably, going to happen next. Before I tell you what I did with that understanding, which was almost nothing, and that's the point, I want to pause and say one thing to you directly. If you've ever stood at the bottom of a stage while someone took your moment and turned it into theirs, and you smiled because smiling was easier than the truth, then you already know this story. So do me a favor before we keep going. Hit that like button and subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from and the one time your family clapped for the wrong person. I read them. I'm Marigold. Now let me take you back into that auditorium where I had to keep standing, keep smiling, with the whole picture suddenly in my hands. The ceremony did not stop for my sister's engagement. It only paused. The dean, to his credit, recovered. He waited out the applause with a thin, professional smile, and when it finally died down, he leaned back to his microphone and finished it. "Yes, Marigold Whitlock." A few people clapped. Most were still buzzing about Delphine. I walked up the steps, shook the dean's hand, took the leather folder, and turned to the lights. From the stage, I could see my whole family, and not one of them was looking at me. They were leaning into Delphine, who was back in her seat now, holding court, turning her hand this way and that so the ants could ooh over the stone. My stolen stone, file number written in my own hand. I found my seat. I sat through the rest of the W's, the X, the Y, the Z, the closing speech, the recessional. I clapped at the right times, and the entire time one question ran under everything like a current. How did a ring that vanished from a locked consignment case at Brennan and Hale end up on my sister's finger? She didn't work there. She'd never set foot in the back. And then a worse question, a colder one. Did she know what it was? I thought about the boyfriend nobody could name. The man who'd supposedly bought her this heirloom. The man my mother coached her to announce, but who wasn't, I now realized, anywhere in that auditorium. There was no fiancé in the room. There was just Delphine and a ring and a story. I'm going to be honest about the temptation, because it would be dishonest not to. There was a version of that afternoon where I stood up right there, in my gown, and said it out loud. That's stolen. I documented that ring myself. There was a version where I made the scene she'd made, where I took the room back. I didn't. And not because I'm a saint. I want to be clear about that, too. I didn't stay quiet to be the bigger person. I stayed quiet because I understood, sitting in that folding chair, that I didn't have to do anything. The machine was already running. The photographs were already out. The clip was already being recorded by my own family and posted. My cousin had it live before the recessional even ended. The ring was going to find its way back to the people looking for it whether I lifted a finger or not. All I had to do was not get in the way. So I made myself a promise in that chair, a quiet one. I would not lie. I would not plant. I would not stage. If anyone asked me a direct question, I would answer it truthfully, because I'm not in the business of perjury for my sister's vanity. But I would not chase her, and I would not warn her, and I would not save her from the thing she had built with her own 2 hands and waved at a camera. I would just let it land where it was already going to land. The recessional ended. I filed out with my row, and as I came through the doors into the lobby, my mother swept toward me, past me, and threw her arms around Delphine. "That was perfect," she breathed. "Did you see Bev's face?" Nobody said the word graduation. Nobody said my name. And I stood there in my cap, holding an empty leather folder, and felt the last warm thing in me go quiet and still and ready. That's when my mother turned to me, finally, and said the thing that decided it. Marigold, be a dear and take everyone's picture. You're so good at staying out of the way." I took the picture. I want you to sit with that for a second, because I did. I held my cousin's phone and I framed my whole family in the lobby, my mother beaming, my father with his hand on Delphine's shoulder, the aunts, the cousins, and at the center of it all, lifted just slightly, on purpose, so the light would catch it, my sister's left hand. I took 3 shots to make sure it was sharp. I'm a professional. When I document a piece, I document it well. "Got it," I said, and handed the phone back. And here's the thing, nobody in that lobby understood. I hadn't just taken a family photo. I'd taken a clear, well-lit, time-stamped image of a stolen consignment ring on a specific person's hand, on a specific day. An image that now lived on my cousin's phone, and on Delphine's, and on Aunt Bev's, and on the live stream my cousin had already posted. I didn't make that happen. I just didn't stop it. And I made sure the focus was good because a blurry photo helps no one, and I am, at my core, a person who does the job right. Then my mother announced we were going to lunch. Not for me, for Delphine. To celebrate the engagement. At a restaurant Delphine picked, on a reservation my parents would pay for, with a toast my father would give. We were 40 minutes into my graduation day, and it had become, completely and without anyone deciding it out loud, my sister's engagement party. I went to lunch. I sat at the end of the table the way I always did, and I watched my family toast a man who didn't exist over a ring that wasn't hers. And I learned more in that lunch than I'd learned in 11 months, because people who think you don't matter say everything in front of you. Lunch is where the story cracked open. I just had to keep my mouth shut and let it. My father stood and tapped his glass and gave a toast. "To my girl," he said, looking at Delphine, "who always finds a way to land on her feet." The table laughed. Lands on her feet. A whole family's worth of looking away packed into one fond little phrase. I refilled my water and I listened. It started with Aunt Bev, who'd had 2 glasses of wine and no filter to begin with. She grabbed Delphine's hand across the table and tilted the ring toward the window. "Now this," Bev said, "is an heirloom. Where did Mr. Mystery find this?" And Delphine, who had been waiting all day for exactly this question, lit up. "It's been in his family for ages," she said. "Like 100 years, his grandmother's." I kept my eyes on my plate. 100 years. The European cut. The mill grain. She was describing my consignment ring's actual provenance, a real estate piece from a real dead woman, and dressing it up as her phantom fiancé's grandmother. Either she'd been told that story by whoever gave her the ring, or she'd made it up and gotten lucky. I didn't know which yet. I just filed it. "And when do we meet him?" Bev pressed. "Soon," Delphine said. "He travels a lot, for work." "What's he do?" "It's complicated." My mother stepped in smoothly, the way she always did when Delphine's stories got thin. "He's very private," she said. "Let's not interrogate her." But Bev was a dog with a bone now, and that was the first crack. Because Bev kept asking, and Delphine kept answering, and every answer was a little vaguer than the last, and I watched my mother's smile get tighter and tighter, and I understood something I hadn't fully let myself understand. My mother didn't know who'd given Delphine the ring either. She was covering for a story she hadn't been briefed on. She was protecting the image on instinct, the way she'd protected it my whole life, without checking whether there was anything behind it. And for the first time, I saw a flicker of something on my mother's face that I'd never seen aimed at Delphine. Doubt. It was gone in a second, but I saw it. Then Delphine made her mistake. The real one. The one that took it from a vague story to a thing that could be checked. She was riding the attention, glowing, and she pulled out her phone. "I posted it," she said. "The proposal moment. Look how many views already." She turned the phone around so the table could see. The clip from the auditorium. Her hand in the light. The cheering. "It's blowing up," she said, delighted. "Strangers are commenting. Someone said it looks like a museum piece." I set down my fork. "Someone said it looks like a museum piece." She thought that was a compliment. She thought strangers admiring the ring meant the ring was admirable. She had no idea, none, that the more eyes landed on that clip, the closer it traveled, click by click and share by share, to the exact eyes that had been looking for that ring for 9 days. The trade is small, the resale world is smaller, a clear shot of a flagged estate piece going viral with a face attached. She'd done the loss prevention team's work for them, and she was bragging about the view count. "Can I see?" I asked, calm, just a sister, curious. She handed me the phone, pleased to have an audience. I scrolled the comments. Beautiful piece. Gorgeous. Old mine cut? And then, 3 comments down, no replies yet, a username I half recognized. Someone in the local trade, who had written one word. Wait. Just that. Wait. The beginning of someone connecting a face to a photograph they'd seen 4 days earlier in an email I'd sent. I handed the phone back. "It's a beautiful ring," I said, which was true. "I hope you know how special it is." She didn't catch the second sentence. She never caught second sentences. She just took the compliment and turned back to Bev, and I sat at the end of the table with my water and watched the timer she'd started in the auditorium tick down in real time, in the comments of her own viral post. CTA. I'll say this once, and then we get back to it. Somewhere in the comments of that clip, the truth was already typing itself out, and Delphine couldn't see it because she was too busy reading the praise. Before we go on, if you've made it this far, drop a comment and tell me. At this point in the story, did you already know how this ends? Guess it before she does. I'll wait. Now, lunch wasn't over yet, and neither was my education. The thing about being underestimated for 31 years is that people forget you can hear. After the toast, after the ring show, the table broke into smaller conversations, and I ended up close enough to my mother and Delphine to catch the part they thought was private. Delphine had leaned in. Her voice dropped, and the glow came off her face for just a second, the way it does on people who are performing happy over something that scares them. "Mom," she said quietly, "I need it to look real for a while." I kept my eyes on my plate. "It is real," my mother said automatically. "I mean, I need people to believe it for a while, until I figure out the rest." The rest. My mother didn't ask the rest of what. She just patted Delphine's hand and said, "We'll figure it out. We always do. We always do." The motto of a house built on figuring it out, on covering, smoothing, paying off, papering over, until the next thing. I'd spent my whole life thinking I was outside that machine. Sitting at that table, I understood I'd been a part of it. Every time I'd smiled in a photo, every time I'd handed back a phone, every time I'd been the easy one. I'd been holding the wall up too. That was the moment something in me changed, not into rage. I want to be clear, because this is where these stories usually turn into a person plotting. I didn't plot anything. I had nothing to plot. The machine was already in motion without me. What changed was simpler and quieter. I stopped holding the wall. That's it. That's the whole turn. For 31 years, I'd been the one who kept the family's secrets from reaching daylight. By staying quiet, by smoothing things over, by making sure I never embarrassed anyone. And at that table, listening to my sister ask our mother to help a lie look real, I decided I was done being the person who held it up. I wasn't going to push it over. I was just going to take my hands off it and step back and let it stand or fall on its own. It fell on its own. It fell hard, and it took the whole weekend to do it. The weekend was almost peaceful, which is the cruelest part. Saturday, my family floated on the engagement. My mother called the relatives. Delphine posted more. The ring in sunlight, the ring with coffee, the ring against the steering wheel of the car my parents were still paying for. Every post traveled a little further. Every post added another timestamp, another angle, another piece of the trail she was laying with her own hands. I went to work that Saturday. Brennan and Hale is open weekends. I walked in at 9, said good morning to the team, and went about my day. Appraisals, a watch repair pickup, a young couple looking at wedding bands. Normal. The loss report on the consignment ring was still open. The consignor had called twice. The insurer had a claim number. None of it was secret, and none of it was mine to act on. It was simply the store's process, grinding forward at the pace these things grind. At one point, our manager, Teresa, came out of the back with her reading glasses pushed up and a printout in her hand. "Marigold, you intaked the Lindqvist consignment, right? The European cut that walked off?" I did. "Insurance wants the documentation packet again. Can you pull your intake photos and the circulation email?" "Of course." I pulled my intake photos. I pulled the circulation email, the one I'd sent 4 days before graduation, the one with that rings picture and file number. I put them in a folder for Teresa, the way I would for any open loss, because that is my actual job, and I handed it over. I did not mention my sister. I did not say I'd seen the ring on a live stream the day before. Not because I was hiding it, but because no one asked, and because the moment anyone did ask, I'd already decided I would tell the truth. The truth just hadn't reached the doorstep yet. That night, it tried to. Delphine showed up at my apartment. She'd never once been to my apartment. In 4 years, she'd never seen it. But Saturday at 9, she was buzzing my door, and when I let her up, she came in already talking, the way she did, filling the room before she was through it. "Okay, so," she said, dropping onto my couch like she lived there, "I need a favor, and you can't make it weird." I stood by the door. "What favor?" "The ring." She held up her hand, the stone catching my lamp the way it had caught the auditorium light. "I need to, move it, quietly. And you know people, right? You work at you do the appraisal thing. I figured you could tell me what it's worth and maybe who'd buy it without a whole production. I want you to understand what she was asking, because she didn't. She was asking her gemologist sister to help her fence a stolen ring. She didn't know it was stolen. I'm fairly sure of that now. But she knew it wasn't a fiancé's heirloom because there was no fiancé, and she'd come to me, of all people, because she'd run out of the kind of people you can ask twice. "Where did you get it, Delphine?" The glow flickered. "Does it matter?" "It matters a lot, actually. A friend." She picked at the couch. "He's in a tight spot. He needs cash, and he can't. It's complicated, he can't sell it himself, and he said if I help him move it, I can keep a cut. That's it. It's nothing. And the engagement? She had the grace, for 1 second, to look away. That was just, it made a better story. People don't get excited about a girl selling a ring. They get excited about a girl getting married. She looked back at me, and there was the real Delphine under the flare, tired and cornered, and 29 going on broke. It bought me time. I needed people to not ask questions. It bought me time. I needed people to not ask questions. She'd said almost the same words to our mother at lunch, and here they were again, the truest things she knew how to say. I should tell you what I felt because it wasn't triumph. It was something closer to grief. My sister had walked into my home and confessed without meaning to that her whole shining life was a series of bought hours, borrowed, faked, stolen, strung together so nobody would ask the question underneath. And the question underneath was the same one I'd carried my whole life, just pointed the other way. Am I enough on my own, or only when I'm holding something that makes people look? I'm not going to help you sell it, I said. She blinked. Why not? Because I don't know where it came from, and neither do you, and I'm not putting my name or my certification anywhere near it. God, Marigold. She stood up, the cornered thing curdling into the old contempt. It's always a whole thing with you. I ask for one favor, one, and you have to make it about your principles. You know what your problem is? You'd rather be right than be family. I didn't answer that. I opened the door. She stopped in the frame on her way out, and for a second I thought she might say something real. She didn't. You're going to feel so stupid, she said, when this all works out fine. Then she left, ring on her hand, dead at her back, walking straight toward Monday without the faintest idea it was waiting. I closed the door and stood in the quiet and understood 3 things at once. She didn't know it was stolen. She would never have asked me if she'd known. And I had just told the truth. I'm not helping you. Without lifting a single finger to harm her. And it had still landed in her as a betrayal. Because in our family, refusing to hold the wall was the only crime there was. The next morning was Sunday, and for a few hours I let myself believe it might just blow over. It almost did. That's the part nobody warns you about. The false calm, the stretch where it looks like the machine might stall and the golden story might survive after all. Because Sunday afternoon, my mother went to work. Not at a job. On the problem. She'd heard, somehow, a relative, a comment, I never learned exactly, that someone online was saying ugly things about Delphine's ring. And my mother did what she had done my entire life. She moved to contain it. She called Aunt Bev and got her to delete her reshare. She called the cousin who'd posted the auditorium clip and told him to take it down. For Delphine's privacy. She had Delphine scrub her own posts. Every sunlit, steering wheel, coffee cup angle of that ring gone by Sunday evening. She drafted a little message for the family group chat about how some people online were jealous and spreading rumors, and how we needed to protect Delphine from negativity. And for a few hours it worked. The posts came down, the reshares vanished. The original clip went dark. My mother called me Sunday at 6, almost cheerful, the crisis manager warmth back in her voice. It's handled, she said. Some nasty people were stirring things up, but we got it all taken down, so if anyone asks you anything, you don't know anything. We're a family. We close ranks. We close ranks, the other family motto. And I'll be honest with you, for about 10 minutes after that call, I felt the old pull. The wall was being rebuilt right in front of me. The golden story was patching itself. All I had to do was say, I don't know anything, and the whole thing might just sink back under the water it had surfaced from. Delphine off the hook, the family intact, me back in my place at the end of the table. I almost did it. I want you to know how close I came to staying furniture for 1 more decade. But I kept thinking about the widower. I didn't know his face. I'd never met him. He was just a name on a consignment file. A man who'd carried his dead wife's rings into my store because he couldn't bear to keep them and couldn't bear to throw them away. And somewhere out there, while my mother deleted reshares to protect the family image, that man still didn't have his wife's ring back. It was on my sister's finger, getting handled. Close ranks, protect Delphine, take the picture, stay out of the way. Every instruction my family had ever given me was the same instruction, and it had never once, not a single time, been pointed at protecting anyone but Delphine. I didn't call anyone. I didn't report anything. I want to be precise. I did not pick up the phone and inform on my sister. The machine my mother was racing to stop had a part she couldn't reach and didn't even know existed, because the clip wasn't only spreading to strangers. It had already, days before, reached the inbox of a man named Robert at my own store who'd seen that ring's photograph in an email with my name on it. My mother could delete every public copy in the county. She couldn't delete the one that had already landed where it mattered, so I did the only thing my refusal actually required. When my mother said, "If anyone asks you anything, you don't know anything," I didn't agree. I just said, "Good night, Mom," and hung up. And I decided that if the doorstep came to me, I would not pretend the wall was still standing. It reached it Sunday night. "Teresa called me at home. That never happens." "Marigold," she said, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to just answer me straight." My stomach didn't drop. I'd been waiting for this call since the auditorium, even if I hadn't admitted it. "Someone sent the loss prevention contact a video," she said. "A graduation video. There's a woman in it showing off a ring to a camera. Robert in the back swears it's the Lindqvist piece, the mill grain, the notch, all of it. And the thing is, the video's got names on it, people tagged, and one of the names is Whitlock." Silence on the line. "Marigold, is that woman related to you?" There it was, the direct question, the one I'd promised myself I would answer. "Yes," I said, "she's my sister." I could have stopped there. I want you to notice that I could have. I could have said yes and nothing more and let them work it out. But Teresa had asked me straight, and I'd made myself a promise, and a half-truth is still a way of holding the wall up. So I told her the rest, plainly, the way I'd tell it to you. "I documented that ring at intake. I'd know it anywhere. I saw it on my sister's hand at my graduation on Friday, and I recognized it immediately. I don't know how she got it. I haven't asked her, and I'm not going to coach her, and I'm not going to lie for her. Whatever the report says, follow it. I'll cooperate with whatever you and the consignor and the insurer need." There was a long pause. "You recognized it Friday," Teresa said slowly. "And you didn't say anything?" And this is the part I'd thought hard about, sitting in that folding chair, so I had the answer ready. I wasn't going to tip her off, and I wasn't going to accuse her in front of 300 people on a guess, I said. "It's not my report to act on. It's the stores and the police's and the insurers. I documented the piece. That's my job. The rest is the process. I just wasn't going to get in the way of it, and I wasn't going to help her hide from it either." Teresa was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Okay, come in early tomorrow. Loss prevention's going to want your intake notes, and they may want to talk to you. And Marigold, I'm sorry, whatever this turns into." I told her not to be sorry. I told her I'd be in at 8. Then I hung up and I sat in my quiet apartment, and I waited for Monday the way you wait for weather you can see coming across an open field. It was coming for Delphine, and I had not lifted a finger to send it. I had only refused for the first time in my life to stand in front of it. Monday morning I got to the store at 7:50. There was a man I didn't recognize in the back office with Teresa. Late 40s, plain suit, a laptop open in front of him. Loss prevention, contracted by the insurer. He had the graduation clip paused on his screen, my sister's hand, frozen mid-wave, the ring catching the light. He had my intake photos open in another window, side by side, the mill grain, the filigree, the half-moon notch. "Ms. Whitlock," he said, and gestured at the 2 images. "You did the intake on this piece?" I did. "Walk me through what you're seeing." So I did. Calmly, professionally, the way I'd describe any stone to any client. I showed him the notch in the gallery where the maker's mark sat. I showed him the hand-done mill grain, the specific filigree on the shoulders, the proportions of the old European cut. I showed him my own handwriting on the intake tag in the photo, the file number, the date. I laid the 2 images beside each other and I said the only honest thing there was to say. "It's the same ring, there's no question. I documented this piece myself, and I'd stake my certification on it." He nodded slowly, the way people nod when a thing they suspected becomes a thing they know. "And the woman in the video?" "My sister, Delphine Whitlock." "You're certain?" I grew up across the hall from her. Yes. He typed for a while, then he asked the question I'd been turning over all weekend. Do you have any reason to believe she knew the piece was stolen? And here, finally, I let myself not know. Because I didn't. I don't know what she knew, I said. I know she told our family it was an heirloom from a fiancé she's never introduced to anyone. I know there's no fiancé that I've ever met or seen. I know she asked our mother, in front of me, to help the engagement look real. But whether she stole it or someone handed it to her or she's covering for whoever did, I genuinely don't know. That's not my call to make. It's yours and the police's. It was the truth. And I think it landed harder for being the truth because he stopped typing and looked at me for a second like he was recalibrating something. Most people, he said, in your position would either swear up and down their sister's innocent or they'd be out for blood. You're doing neither. I'm a gemologist, I said. I'm telling you what's true about a stone. The rest isn't mine to perform. He went back to his laptop. Teresa caught my eye across the office, and there was something in her face I hadn't seen aimed at me in 8 years of working under her. Respect, maybe. Or its quieter cousin. A second man arrived 20 minutes later. A detective. Actual police this time, not a contracted investigator, because a flagged stolen ring connected to a string of estate burglaries was no longer a store's insurance matter. He came into the back, shook my hand, and asked me to walk him through the same thing again. The notch, the mill grain, the intake tag in my own writing, the date the piece went missing, the email I'd sent. I did it again, the same way, calm and exact. He asked if I'd be willing to provide a written statement and let them photograph my original intake documentation. I said yes. He asked gently whether I understood that my statement might be used in a case against my sister. I understand, I said. And you're still willing. So I'm not going to lie about a stone because of who's wearing it, I said. That's the whole job. The day I do that is the day my certification means nothing. He nodded and wrote something down. And I realized, watching him write, that I had reached the exact place I'd been walking toward since the auditorium. Not a stage. A small back office with 2 strangers and a printout. No microphone, no audience, no scene. Just the quiet, mechanical truth, doing what truth does when nobody gets in its way. That's when my phone started buzzing. It was my mother, then Delphine, then my mother again. I stepped out of the office to take it because some part of me already knew. The weather had crossed the field. It had reached the house. Marigold. My mother's voice was wrong, thin and high. Where are you? At work. There are? Marigold. There are people. A detective called Delphine. They're saying the ring is stolen. They're saying it came from a store. They have video. Her voice cracked. You work at a jewelry store. There it was. The connection she'd never once made because she'd spent 31 years not thinking about where I worked or what I did because the easy one's life is furniture. I do, I said. A silence on the line that I will remember for the rest of my life. The sound of my mother's whole story rearranging itself. Did you do this? She whispered. Did you do this to your sister? And I want to tell you, this was the hardest moment of the entire weekend. Harder than the auditorium. Because the easy answer, the answer that would have ended the call, kept the peace, held the wall, was, of course not, Mom. I'd never. And it would even have been technically true. I hadn't done anything to Delphine. But I knew exactly what she was really asking. She was asking me to take it back. To make it go away. To be, one more time, the daughter who absorbs the family's trouble so the family doesn't have to feel it. No, I said. I didn't do anything to her. She did this to herself, and I'm not going to fix it for her. Then I told my mother the rest because I'd promised myself I wouldn't lie. And the truth was the only thing I had left to give that was actually mine. I documented that ring at my store before it was stolen, I said. I recognized it on her hand at my own graduation, the graduation she took the microphone away from. I didn't say a word. I didn't report her. I didn't have to. She filmed herself waving a stolen ring at a camera and posted it to the entire internet, and the people looking for that ring found it the way anyone would have. I'm not the one who did this to Delphine. I'm just the one who finally stopped cleaning up after her. My mother started to cry. Not the manipulative crying I'd grown up around. The real kind. The kind that comes when a story you've believed your whole life turns out to be load-bearing and you've just watched it crack. "How could you let it happen?" she said. And there it was. The whole family philosophy in one sentence. Not "how could Delphine steal a ring?" Not "how could we never know who her fiancé is?" Not "how could we have spent decades covering for her?" How could you let it happen? As if my silence were the crime. As if the easy one's job, even now, even here, was to have thrown herself in front of the truth. "I didn't let anything happen," I said. "For once, I just didn't stop it." And I hung up. Delphine called 4 minutes later. I almost didn't answer. I did because some part of me needed to hear her ask. She wasn't shouting. That's what I remember. The flare was gone, snuffed clean out, and what was left was the voice I'd heard maybe twice in 31 years. The small one, the under voice, the one with no audience left to play to. "They're saying it's stolen," she said. "Marigold, they're saying it came from your store. You can fix this, right? You work there. You can tell them it's a mistake. You can tell them it's not the same ring." There it was, the last and largest version of the question my whole family had been asking me my entire life. Be the easy one. Absorb it. Make it not real. Stand in front of the truth so the rest of us don't have to feel it. And I want to be honest with you because this is the lowest the floor ever got. For 1 second, I felt the full pull of it. She was my sister. She sounded genuinely afraid, maybe for the first time ever, and there was a sentence I could say that would at least slow it all down. I could muddy the identification. I could say I wasn't certain. I'm the gemologist. A flicker of doubt from me carries weight. I could have given her that. "It's the same ring, Delphine," I said. "I documented it myself. I'm not going to say it isn't." A sound came down the line that I'd never heard from her. A real one. "Then I'm done," she whispered. "Do you get that? You're ending me." "No," I said, and I kept my voice as level as I knew how, because she was about to explode and one of us had to stay still. "I didn't take that ring out of a case. I didn't tell you to wave it at 300 people. I didn't post it. I'm not the one who did this. I'm just the one who's not going to undo it for you. Those aren't the same thing, even though I know they feel like it." And then she did explode. The way the spec of every one of these stories says the cornered one does, not with apology, but with rage. She called me jealous. She called me a snake. She said I'd been waiting my whole life for this, that I'd always hated her, that I'd ruined my own family to feel important for once. Every accusation was a confession wearing a costume, and I let her throw all of them, and I did not throw a single one back. When she ran out, there was just breathing on the line. "You always wanted the spotlight," I said quietly. "You finally got all of it. I'm sorry it turned out to show this." She hung up on me, and I sat in my apartment with the phone going dark in my hand, and I did not feel like I'd won anything. I felt like a person who had finally, at 31, put down something so heavy she'd forgotten she was carrying it. I want to tell you what was actually going down across town because I pieced it together over the next 2 days, and it matters that you understand. I wasn't there. I didn't orchestrate it. I just stopped being the brakes. The clip had done exactly what viral clips do. It traveled. By Sunday, it had been shared into a local community group and 2 regional ones. My mother spent that afternoon deleting copies as fast as she could find them, but she only knew about the public ones, the relatives and the strangers. She had no idea the clip had a second life, moving quietly through a channel she couldn't see and couldn't reach. Monday morning, a man named Robert, the senior bench jeweler at my store, who'd seen the Lindqvist circulation email I'd sent 4 days before my graduation, saw the clip in his own feed because the algorithm is small town in a small town. He told me later he almost scrolled past it, a girl showing off an engagement ring. The internet is made of those. But something snagged. He went back. He zoomed in. And there it was. The millgrain, the filigree, and the half-moon notch in the gallery that he'd been looking at in an emailed photograph all week. He didn't say a word to anyone in the family because he didn't know anyone in the family. He just took a screenshot, opened my circulation email, set the two pictures side by side, and walked them into Teresa's office before the store had even opened. That's the whole machine. A bench jeweler who almost scrolled past. An email I'd sent doing my ordinary job. A cousin who tagged Delphine for the likes. A view count my sister was proud of. Teresa flagged it to loss prevention. Loss prevention matched it to the open report in the police file. They pulled the names tagged in the video, and within an hour they had a last name, a face, and a live stream confession of possession with 300 witnesses and a view count still climbing by the minute. Not one of those people was lying in wait. Not one of them was me, hiding a recording or springing a trap. It was just a lot of ordinary people doing ordinary things in the path of a woman who'd grabbed a microphone she had no right to and broadcast the one thing she most needed kept quiet. A detective called Delphine because Delphine's own cousin had tagged her in the post. They didn't have to find her. She'd announced herself. She'd announced herself into a microphone on a stage at my graduation, on camera, on purpose. Nobody hid anything to make this happen. The opposite. Everyone hid it as fast as they could once it broke. My mother frantic on the phone, Delphine deleting posts that were already screenshotted, the family closing ranks. But you can't put a viral clip back in the box. The cheers in that auditorium were now evidence, time-stamped and tagged, and the same row that stood up to celebrate her was about to spend a very quiet week not answering calls from relatives. The man who'd given Delphine the ring turned out to be real, by the way. Not a fiancé. A man she owed money to, the latest in the chain of people Delphine owed, who'd given her the ring to sell quietly to clear part of a debt, telling her it was an old family piece he needed cash for. Where he'd gotten it, and how it connected back to whoever lifted it from our consignment case, became a police matter that I was, thankfully, only a documenting witness to. Delphine had taken a stolen ring she was supposed to quietly sell, and instead of selling it quietly, she'd waved it at a camera and announced a fake engagement to upstage her sister's graduation. Because the debt scared her and the spotlight was the only drug that ever made her feel safe, and she could not, even with a stolen diamond on her hand and creditors at her back, resist taking my moment to feel like the bright one for 90 more seconds. That's not me being cruel. That's the report. That's what it was. And the debt, when the picture finally filled in, was worse than even I'd guessed. I learned the shape of it the way you learn things in a family like mine. Sideways, in pieces, from people who shouldn't have been telling me. Over those 2 days, my father said one true thing to me on the phone, in a voice I'd never heard from him, flat and old. He told me Delphine owed somewhere north of $40,000. Not all to one person, to a chain of them, a payday outfit, a co-signed car loan gone bad, 2 investors in a boutique that never opened its doors, and finally the man with the ring, who was the bottom of the chain and the most patient and the most dangerous. $40,000! My parents had been quietly pouring money into the leak for years, and the leak had only gotten wider because the more they covered it, the less reason Delphine had to stop drilling holes. That was the real heirloom in our family, not a diamond. A habit of rescue, handed down, that had finally cost more than anyone could pay. I sat with that number for a long time. $40,000 while I'd worked 4 years of nights for a diploma nobody clapped for. And I understood finally why the spotlight had always skipped me. It wasn't that I was dim. It was that a steady light doesn't need watching. You only stand and stare at the thing you're afraid is about to go out. The man at the bottom of the chain, the ring man, turned out to have a record. The ring had come to him, the police eventually pieced together, through a fence connected to a string of estate burglaries across 2 counties, one of which was the quiet hit on our consignment case. He'd handed it to Delphine not as a gift and not as a fiancé, but as a job. Move this, keep a cut, clear part of what you owe me. He'd picked her because she was desperate, and because she was the kind of pretty, plausible woman who could walk a diamond into a resale shop and have it appraised without anyone blinking. He had not counted on her stealing a microphone and broadcasting his stolen ring to the entire internet from a graduation stage. Neither had she, I think. The flair just took over, the way it always did. The drug was stronger than the danger. So the man who'd given Delphine an alibi accidentally handed the police a face, a date, and a live stream. And Delphine, trying to look like the bright one for 90 more seconds, lit up the whole chain. The reckoning, when it came, did not look like the movies. There was no courtroom scene with me on the stand pointing a finger. My part was small and clinical: a signed statement, my intake documentation, my certification on the identification of the piece. The store recovered the ring as evidence. The consignor, that quiet widower, got his late wife's ring back, which is the one part of this whole thing that still makes my throat tight when I think about it, because somewhere under all the family noise, a dead woman's ring went home. Delphine wasn't dragged off in handcuffs at dawn. It was slower and grayer than that. Questioning. A lawyer my parents drained their savings to afford. Charges that I'm told, last I heard, were being negotiated down because she cooperated and named the man who'd given it to her. The fake engagement evaporated. The aunts found out there was no fiancé. The view count that had thrilled her became the thing her lawyer wished didn't exist. But here is the part I keep coming back to, the part that the auditorium kept paying off for weeks. The same row that stood up and cheered for Delphine. They turned. Not all at once. One at a time, quietly, the way people back away from a thing they realize they were standing too close to. The family friend who'd recorded the whole announcement, phone held high, deleted her copy and stopped returning my mother's calls. The cousin who'd posted the clip and tagged Delphine, the post that called the detective straight to her door, went silent in the family chat and changed his number, I heard, after the police asked him to confirm the timestamp. Aunt Bev, who 2 days earlier had practically pulled the ring history out of Delphine across a lunch table, now told anyone who'd listen that she'd always thought something was off about that engagement. A week before, she'd been the loudest believer in the room. That's the thing about a crowd that cheers for the wrong person. The cheering is never really for you. It's for the story you're telling them, and the second the story turns, the crowd turns with it, and they don't even feel the turn. They just remember it differently. By the following weekend, half the people who'd been on their feet for Delphine's engagement were on the phone with each other, marveling at how they'd never been sure about it, lowering their voices when they got to the part about the ring. The row that cheered went very, very quiet, and not one of them ever clapped for the diploma in the leather folder either. Not before, not after. But that, at least, I'd made my peace with a long time ago. My family did what the family does. They tried to make it my fault. My mother called it a betrayal, said a real sister would have warned her, said I'd always been jealous, said I'd humiliated the family. Me, the one who'd sat silent at the bottom of a stage so as not to make a scene. Aunt Bev, who'd practically interrogated the ring out of Delphine, suddenly remembered it as my doing. The story rewrote itself in real time, the way it always had, with me cast as the villain because I was the one who'd stopped playing the part of furniture. I let them say it. I didn't argue, but I didn't take it back either, and that the not taking it back was the most radical thing I'd ever done in that family. Because here's what I finally understood, sitting in my quiet apartment while my phone lit up with their fury. For 31 years, I'd believed the spotlight skipped me because I wasn't bright enough to hold it. The easy one. The background one. The one who lands nothing while her sister lands on her feet. I'd thought my smallness was a fact about me. It wasn't. It was a job. A job I'd been assigned at birth and performed flawlessly. The job of holding up the wall so the family's golden story could keep standing. The spotlight skipped me because I let it. Because being seen would have meant being a problem, and I'd been trained to never ever be a problem. I quit that job at a lunch table over a stolen ring, not with a speech, just by taking my hands off the wall and letting the thing stand on its own. If you've been the easy one, the steady one, the one nobody worries about, hear me. Being low maintenance is not the same as being loved. Sometimes the family that never worries about you is just the family that never sees you. And you are allowed to stop carrying the wall. You don't have to push it over. You don't have to burn anything down. You just have to take your hands off and step back and let people stand on what they actually built. That's not revenge. That's the end of a job you never agreed to. It's been a few weeks now. The charges are still working their way through whatever charges work their way through. Delphine isn't speaking to me, which, honestly, is the quietest my life has been in a long time. My mother has called twice, once to yell, once, 3 days later, in a smaller voice to ask how I was. I told her I was fine, and for the first time in my life when I said fine, I wasn't settling for it. I meant it. The widower sent a card to the store, thanking the team for getting his wife's ring back. Teresa pinned it on the staff board. I read it on my breaks. A dead woman's ring went home because a small machine of ordinary people did their ordinary jobs, and because, for once, nobody who knew better stood in the way. He came in person a week later to collect it from evidence release. An old man, careful with his hands, who set the ring on the counter and looked at it for a long moment before he could pick it up. He told me his wife had worn it for 51 years. He told me he'd brought it in to consign because he couldn't stand to see it in the drawer, and then he hadn't been able to stand that it was gone either. And now, here it was. Home. He didn't know my last name was the same as the woman in the video. I never told him. It wasn't his to carry. When he left, I went into the back and sat down and cried for about 4 minutes, which is the longest I'd let myself cry in years. Not for Delphine, not for me. For a man who'd loved one person for 51 years, and for everything in my own family that had never once been built to last that long, because we'd spent all our care propping up a story instead of loving the people in it. Then I washed my face and went back out front because there were clients waiting, and the job was the job. My mother called again that evening, the third call. She didn't yell this time. She asked in a careful voice whether I'd thought about how this looks, whether there was still some way to soften it, whether I understood what I was doing to the family's name. I do understand, I said. I'm not doing anything to it. I just stopped being the only one holding it up. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said the truest thing she'd said in 31 years. I don't know how to do this without her being the center. I know, I said. That's the whole problem, and it was never going to be my job to fix it. I still have the cap and gown, the leather folder too, with the diploma I actually earned, the 4 years of working full-time and studying at night, the honors cord I ironed twice because my hands needed something to do. Nobody at that lunch ever congratulated me on it. That's all right. I know what it took. I was there for every night of it, even when no one else was. People ask me if I regret staying quiet in that auditorium, if I wish I'd grabbed the mic back, named the ring, made the scene. No, because the scene I'd have made would have been about me, and I'd spent my whole life being told the family didn't have room for a scene about me. Instead, I let my sister make her own scene, all the way to the end, with her own 2 hands and her own stolen diamond and her own 300 witnesses. She always wanted the spotlight. She finally got it, all of it, every last watt. And I was the only one in that auditorium who knew that the brightest light in the world is also the one that shows everyone exactly what you're holding. I just stepped back and let it shine.